Welcome to the Frequency Mob podcast. We are here with episode 10, and we are so grateful to be here with Katherine of Love Liberates. What is will you share your handle just at the outset so we can Love
Love liberates you.
Liberates you on Instagram, and we will link her handle below as well. But Katherine is a dedicated mother of two girls. She's a wife and a friend, and she has a rich background in yoga, wellness, and hospitality. And as an entrepreneur, she's passionate about creating a sense of home, both internally and physically, through movement, food, and sensory experiences. She's currently relocating back to her home country of Panama, and Katherine continues developing her own Junglaow business while deepening her connection to the land and cherishing her family, which she considers her greatest treasure. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us, Katherine.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, we just had such a rich pre-record conversation, but I'd love to invite you to speak into that transition. I feel like it's so alive for women right now, this desire to connect with organic rhythms and to, remove ourselves from some of the uh, inorganic impulses of like on-grid living. And so I know just having, relocated from California to Panama, you're able to speak directly into that transition and maybe share some of your personal story about how that has moved in your life.
Yeah, of course. It's so funny because as you were mentioning my handle, Love Liberates, um, I had that tattooed, into my arm, Love Liberates. And I feel like every time you tattoo something, it's like, are you ready to really like have that as a teaching, Because it's gonna teach you, like what you're putting, into your body. And I remember a friend actually had that tattoo in California, and I was sitting with him, and I'm like, "Love liberates," and he just like, "Wah." And I think that was like a deep unraveling of everything we were talking before recording, and it's like I started realizing because I had such a big background of yoga, healing, business, but also on myself, I feel like I went through like the Eat, Pray, Love quite literally because in my 20s I was very much into I had a restaurant. I was very much like living in these big cities like Paris, a very glamorous lifestyle. And my restaurant was pretty glamorous. And then as I closed up my restaurant, which was during my Saturn return, like 2730, I feel like I went deep into spirituality, which was amazing and needed. But I feel like I jumped from one extreme to the other. And when this whole Love Liberates was catching me, I was like, oh my God, like I want to be free, to be whoever I am feeling that needs to be alive in me. And I started realizing, I'm from Panama, I'm Latin, I have my wild side, that I had been neglecting that side, the wild woman. And she was pretty pissed, you know. So I started like really listening and understanding, and my work, which was already like aligned with women, started reflecting that. I was less like driving women to this perfection because like I said, like when I became 30 and I went to India, I was like in this place of like, I pretty much meditate, and I was like a vegetarian, and I didn't do drugs or alcohol. And I feel like as I was like integrating motherhood, I felt like because I birthed two women, I was like, these ladies don't want a perfect mom. They want a mom that is like happy and free. And it's almost like the rewilding, no? That we started listening to a lot of that word rewilding in our from 2020. And I started into that journey of like my work with women being more like, who are you? You know, like what really wants to come out of the closet, because I feel like it is our closets that make us sick, you know, whatever it is that you're hiding, that you're neglecting, that you're not paying attention, that you're not liberating, you know. And a lot of women that were like coming into the healing, which is beautiful, that women were coming so hard into the healing and into their spirituality, there was a tendency of women to be like just very hard on themselves, you know, because they were trying to run away from probably like pretty hardcore stuff, you know, like addictions or like things that hurt them in the past. But then on the other end, they were doing kind of like the opposite way, right? Like, like I don't want to be me. I want to be this, you know, idea of what a holy woman is. So we were like going back into like these patterns of like very interesting, you know. So I feel like I just went into another subject of what you asked me, but I think it's important, you know, because it's all part of it. And I feel like, so yeah, I was explaining to you before too, like my life was pretty much situated in California, in Encinitas. When my first daughter was born, I felt the calling to really work with women. And I feel like it was for me too, you know, like I told you, I birthed two little girls. So I was being called into like, what is it to be a woman, you know, the role of being a woman in this world as it is right now, but also very ancestrally, you know, like my lineage, healing that legacy and my loyalty and what that even means, you know, because you know it's such a deep path of like understandings, like our loyalties to our mothers and to our grandmas, you know, which sometimes carry a lot of burden that it's not for us to carry. So it's like the work became that, you know, it's like get out, you know, wild, what is that? And 2020 hits and we're here down in Panama leading this women's retreat, and the pandemic hits, you know, the world. We finished one retreat, the second one had to be canceled because nobody could travel anywhere. So I was here during the pandemic, during the first months of pandemic. I was here in Bocas del Toro, which is where I live now, and I became like absolutely in love. I fell in love with the land in a way that I hadn't before because of the nature of what happened to us, you know, in 2020 is like the presence that needed to be carried. And I had a small child, which was my first, you know, she was still little. And I remember like growing this connection with my immediate neighbors and just doing these things, which were like, you know, hidden from the government because it was kind of intense, you know, here in Panama as well. It's like, so we would go to the beach and just like do the simple things. And one day my husband is like, well, we're moving to Hawaii. And I remember very clearly, and I told you this before, I felt like Hawaii had been this crush of mine. And actually I was the one telling my husband, like, we're gonna live there one day. And he's like, you're crazy. And as I fell in love with Bocas, it's like this crush that I had for all of these times, like, okay, I want you. And I was like, but now I'm in love with someone else. And it just feels real and authentic. But, you know, I did what family does, you know, it's like sit down, analyze, you know, the whole perspective. My husband's job had like a promising thing to be like developed, you know, in Maui. And of course, like it's not like I hated Maui. It's not like he was forcing me to move to, you know, somewhere ugly. So I'm like, okay, let's go. It was pretty fast, very 2020. It's not like we had so much time to think about it. It was like pretty ugly times in the world, you know. So we did it, and So much happened in 3 years. But I remember when I left Pocas, it's like I knew that I was gonna come back. You know, it's like a the deeper intuition, you know. I'm like, I don't know when it is that I'm gonna come back. I have like no idea. We all didn't know anything. In 2020, we were all like big question mark, right? Like what is gonna happen. So I went for the adventure. There was so much healing and situations that came along, and I feel like birthed Ocean, which is my second daughter. But finally, I feel like the date arrived that we're like, okay, I made the decision. We're coming back to Panama, to Bocas, and we're super happy. You know, we're like I said also before we started recording, it's not like, oh, now in Bocas everything's perfect, la 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 la. No, it's like the processes continue being deepened and developed, you know, and rediscovered. Let's go back to that wound, you know. And now the same issues are here in Latin America, but it just feels like the right place to be, which is something that I was longing for a while. I just felt like I just similar, you know, when you're in a relationship that you're like, oh, I'm certain that I need to be here. I was longing to be in this place where I'm like, okay, now I'm 40, you know, I've traveled quite a bit and lived in many places. I know that the perfect place does not exist, just like as the perfect person does not exist. But at least you want to be with someone that you're like, it feels right to invest my time and to go through the hardships. And I feel like this is the place that at least it feels right to grow my little daughters. I know, like, I love America. I'm also a citizen, you know, of the United States. I have so much love for 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 America, because it honestly has given me so much. But I also felt the urge of like leaving America, you know, leaving the idea of like living there for a while and just coming back to Latin grounds where life is beautiful, imperfect, but it has like a different sense. I honestly also like, I mean, I'm sure you guys can relate, but it's like the weapons thing, you know, it would really like drive me crazy. And I'm like, okay, I need to live for a little bit and come to a very simple place and grow little kids in this surrounding. And right now I'm like in love with very simple things, you know? Like I feel like also we all have this PTSD, you know, that I feel like sometimes we don't even realize because it has become the normal. Uh, but I heard my body saying, because I traveled a lot, you know, even when we had Guyam and Ocean, we traveled so much. And I'm like, this year, I don't want to travel anywhere. I don't want to do a suitcase. I don't want to move my things. I want to wake up, have routine, you know, take the girls, boom, back to school, to the beach, see the same people, have the conversations. Also, when I left Hawaii, I took a year off from social media, which sounds so silly because I mean, it's not like, you know, I did the greatest thing, but I did because I was working very hardcore with it. I was working with an online platform. I was managing it. So my life was going around a lot with the online world, which was amazing. And I'm so grateful for. But when I was leaving Hawaii, even though it was my decision, I go back again to comparing it to relationships because I think it's a very valid way to look at it. It's like, even though I was breaking up with Hawaii, it was my decision. It doesn't mean that when you are the one taking the decision that you're not gonna be hurt and going also through the transformation, right? Like people sometimes think like that it's only the one that it's leaving, or the one that is left, sorry, the one that has the wound to take care of. But even though my decision was like, you know, through the years and like I felt it was the right decision, it didn't mean that it wasn't hard enough, you know, to move a whole family. It's like a plant. that if you put in the soil, starts growing roots. And I'm like, I know this plant, it's coming with me, but I know this plant also is gonna have to go through the process of like taking it out of the land, you know, taking it into a new soil, taking care of it. It's very fragile. You know, the first months, it's a special care to relocate a whole family and start a new life, even though it feels right, you know. But here we are, and that's part of the journey, right?
I like the plant analogy. As you were sharing with that, I was just sort of reflecting on my own experience moving away from, I had my son in San Francisco. And when I left that space, it was truly like heartbreaking. And even in just like the first year, I was just on the other side of the water, just the other side of the bay. It wasn't that far. But when we woke up in the morning and took our dog for a walk, I could see the city every morning on the other side of the water. And I was like, so sad because I wanted to be there. I was like, I know the hill I want to walk. I know I want where I want to see the sunset. I know the beach I want to take him to. Um, and it wasn't that I was in an ugly place. It just, there was like the plants, right? You take the roots. Sometimes when you repot a plant, some of those roots break off and they stay in the soil where they were. And so there was little bits of my energy that was still there. And even recently in the last few months, I've realized there's little bits of my energy that is still there. And so I've just gone through this process of reclaiming my energy slowly and really trying to, if we talk about spirituality and deep spirituality, like actually trying to feel that energy come back into my body. And what comes up is, what had been coming up was like a sense of abandonment. And I don't need to go more into that right now, but it just felt really deep. And as you were sharing that, I was just remembering and visualizing the uprooting of the plant and putting it into new soil. There's a time of calibration that needs to happen. You're getting used to the soil, like you as a mother, your systems, your routines, your physical body with the sunlight and the energy from the earth and the foods that you're eating. All of this is a time to calibrate yourselves to the body, calibrate your life to the body. And then as the mother, you're doing that and also holding space for your children to do that. And it can be a lot. Yeah.
Yes. And as you're saying all of that, it's so beautiful because I have a 6-year-old, you have an 8-year-old, so you know more than me. But when we moved, Gaian was only 4, so I was like, she's so little, and she really went through it because I don't know if it's because she's a Virgo, she's very earthly. It's like she really felt like the move, and she would cry because when we moved, we also didn't come to Panama right away. We took like an Euro trip, Europe, and because my husband had some work and I love Europe. And it was amazing, but it was like heartbreaking because she would, when you're on vacation and your kids ask you like, so when are we gonna go back home? And I had to explain to her, it's like, this home is changing. And she would cry and she's like, no, I want to go to that home, which I know of. I know how my room is. I want to go back to playing with the things that I miss. And it's so beautiful what you're saying, because even though as a mom, I wanted to take out the pain and just brush it off and bring something new for her to be excited, I had to be mindful of like, it's valid for her to mourn this. And even up to this day, we talk about it because she says, Mom, I miss Maui. And it's been such a process because now she's so intelligent that she's like, it doesn't mean that I want to go back there, because if I would leave Bocas, I would miss it so much, but I still miss it. And it's so beautiful because I think it's related to that which you were saying about like some roots staying in those places. And I started really analyzing that. And I was like, you know what? I also miss California so much, which is where she was born. Gaia was born in California. And actually, for me to leave California, it was also very painful. And also, I had lived in Europe. So now when we talk about this, I'm like, Gaia, I also miss Europe, you know, because when I was 17, I went to Europe and I lived there for 5 years. And I also went through it. Every time I would leave a place, a part of me stayed there. But now I choose to, like you said, it's like maybe a part of that place also lives in me.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell her, it's like a part, like Maui lives in you now. And maybe one day we'll also leave Bocas, you know? It's like this is the new way of living and existing, and it's so beautiful and it's so deep for us mothers, right? To hold the grief of our children and allow this grief to transform us instead of like trying to brush it off with something exciting, because that seems like the easiest. But then we are skipping a very fundamental part of life, which is like a death, because every relocation, it feels like a mini death. What you're saying is like the last time you woke up in San Francisco and you knew that that was the last time that you would spend time in that specific way, because I'm sure you can go back, but it's like that specific way stays, but now lives inside of you, right? So nice. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm farther away from San Francisco now because we're in the Portland area, but my son was pretty young when we left, and we did have the opportunity to go back and forth eventually, but it's not the same as like living on that rock. And and then moving here, I'm so glad you brought up the, I don't remember the exact words you said, but it's just this idea of kind of a death, and allowing the process of like being in this new space. When we first arrived in the Portland area, it was really hard for my son. It was hard for me too, but it was really hard for him. And I made the choice to not be busy, you know? I mean, there was nothing open anyway because everything was closed and people were afraid of like smiling at each other even. But we had slow mornings and slow afternoons and slow evenings, and I just made that choice to not be busy, to let it settle, let it sink, to be barefoot as much as possible on the little plot of land that we had available to us, and to let that land kind of nourish where in those moments, because it's, you know, we arrived to this place and it's holding us through this process. And I feel that, yeah, I feel that in the rejection of it, we're kind of rejecting, what do I want to say? It's like we're closing off the receiving from like the energy of the earth, where of the mother frequency. It's like that's in and around everything. We're not receiving it when we're saying, I want to be over there. And I still weave with this too, because there's like, I'm not super happy that it's cold right now. I'd like more sunshine still. Not ready to say goodbye to the sun for 9 months. But yesterday morning I woke up and it was kind of misty and foggy in the morning, and I took a deep breath and it was cold, and I was like, be mad. It's so nice. It's so nice to experience the changes, and we hold our children through those as well, and we are a model for how to be in change. And being in change is difficult for a lot of us, but it is something that never goes away. So if we can, even if it's uncomfortable, if we can just be still in the change, we'll find the medicine.
I love that. Yeah, and it's such a thing, right, for women to allow ourselves to be gentle and not be doing much, because there's also a part of me that it's like ingrained, even though it's a conscious decision that I took, for example, like to leave social media. Like there's still a part of me that it's like, what are you doing? You could be doing so much more, you know? Uh, there's so many. And I think like part of the reason why I left social media is because of that, because I'm like, I knew that I was gonna go through a deep transformation of this mini death of moving my whole family. And I was like, I need to pay attention to my immediate surroundings and family instead of like being analyzing what the next move is gonna be. Or, I'm not to blame social media, because in the end it's us, how we relate to it and what we perceive. But I was very much, because I was managing this online community, like my job was like, to be the doer and what should we be doing more, like to keep this program being nurturing enough for the women that are part of it, that I was always analyzing, what other people were doing. And therefore it's like, okay, we should be doing more. And I was like, this is gonna kill me if I start doing this. And I really want to pay attention to this transition. Otherwise, I'm going to miss the juices, by being like always looking at what other people, instead of like looking at what this move out, meaning transformation, is doing for me and my family, and I was having like, these frictions with my husband, and I'm like, I just want to pay attention, I'm like, what would you like for others to do with you? Is like become Ed, become the lover, in other words, which is still process. Still definitely a process, because I feel like more than ever when we become parents, we start seeing like, wow, how close we are to our parents, And I feel like the things that we usually say, like, I never want to become that, are the ones that a lot of times we attract the most, Um, so it's like, yeah, understanding that as well. But yeah, it's interesting, the paying attention and the presence, and how these tools are so beautiful, and how we need to have so much discipline at the same time, uh, to not overwhelm us. And I love that you said, yeah, taking time to arrive into a place and give respect by paying attention, by having slow mornings. Like right now, I don't have a car because my car is at the mechanic, and this is an island, so things take forever. But it's been such a blessing, because now I walk my daughter to her school, and I totally feel what you're saying, like paying attention. Paying attention is like, this morning we were picking up flowers, and we made like a bouquet from wildflowers, and we brought it to the school. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I'm like, oh damn it, like, I'm overwhelmed with motherhood, and I'm like, yeah, looking forward to also this time, adult conversations. But then it's so funny, because when you have your time, it's like you reminiscence on those moments with them, when you were picking those flowers, when you were breastfeeding and you didn't have time for yourself, But that's why I think it's important still to have adult time, so you can miss the other things,
And there's like a lot of processing that happens, because when you're present in the moment, you're kind of just like, you're being there. And then when we can come together right now, there's a lot that we receive like through the peripheral mind, I guess I would call it that. And then right now, as we're focusing on this conversation, it's like, oh yeah, the wildflowers, that was so beautiful. And that's giving something. to your daughter being allowed to do that instead of driving in the car. It was a part of the morning, and it's memorable and it's beautiful. And um, my son, when he was having a hard time, we would, when he was like younger, I mean, he's still young, but like it's a little different now. Um, we would go for walks, and especially in California, people have lots of beautiful gardens. There's flowers all year round because they can, nothing really falls away and dies. And if he was having a hard time, I noticed that he would just like start to pick flowers, and he would like have a bouquet. And he's Capricorn, so also earth energy. And one day I asked him what he was doing because he was crying. He was having a very difficult time with something, and he had these tears, and he started picking flowers. And I said, what are you doing? Like, I love that you pick flowers, but do you want to explain this to me? And he's 4 years old, and he said, I'm gathering joy,
Oh,
because flowers brought him joy. And like, I just started crying in that moment because I was like, yeah, man, you're right. Let's do it. Let's gather joy. And we ended up having so many flowers. And this was like in the beginning, actually, of the pandemic. So people were just really shutting each other out. And so we ended up having enough flowers to have several bouquets. And then we just put them on the doorsteps of the people that he was missing. And that
oh,
was, that was so beautiful. And yeah, I just, we learn a lot from the kids. So it is important to have this adult time, because I want to, say that, yeah, to him, I expressed like, thank you. I learned so much from this. This was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with me. Um, but also as mothers, we're receiving like a different layer of what that medicine is. And yeah, I want to ask you about your experience going off social media for a year, because I know you were pretty active before. And I don't know if that was choice to go off for an entire year, like I'm going to go off for a year, or if it was just, I'm going to go off until I'm ready to come back. And what was
Mm.
that journey like for you?
Well, I feel like I heard from a friend when she did it. Her name is Lauren, uh, and her handle on Instagram is Indivara Shakti. She was a friend I met in California during my women's circles. She came to a women's circle, and we became friends like instantly, and we knew it was gonna be like forever. And eventually, when I moved to Maui, she also moved to Hawaii. And yeah, we kept the relationship, and she did that. She did like a year off from social media. And in that moment, I was moved by it because I knew how much it meant for us, at that time. Because again, like I told you, like in 2020, my business became like online, as many of us, luckily, because I feel like I transitioned really well into that arena. So it's like social media became everything to us, right? Like 2020 marked a very important era of like how we all went hardcore on social media and depended on it in a beautiful way, because we couldn't see people. So we were sharing, the transformation that it meant for us through media. People were needing a lot of healing. So obviously it's like I was working with that. So, I saw that act from her like very courageous. And when you see that, like you see something in another woman and you're not thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do that, but it just stays with you and you're marinating in it. And I always thought like, wow, like I would like to do that one day. And when I was doing that relocation, I felt like if there's a right time to do this, it would be right now. I felt like the calling to discover like me out of my handle, you know, like who is Katherine? Not love liberates you. Even though I love the handle, I love the meaning that came to me when I even changed, because before love liberates you, my handle was the Yoga Love Project. because I was like teaching yoga and that was like my world then. But then, as I told you, when I discovered my friends that do Love Liberates, I became in love with it because I was already going on a journey of realizing that I didn't want to label myself as a yogi, because when I was outside in the world and I didn't want to behave like a yogi, people were like, "Aren't you a yogi?" And I was like, "Well, I'm also a lot of other things, not also a yogi, you know?" And it's so funny because many years ago, when I was like really trying so hardcore to be a yogi, I did a trip to Argentina with some friends of mine. We were all single and we were like wine tasting. And we partied really hard. And we came back to our hotel pretty, drunk, fun. And I remember like the next day that we were leaving, like these people left me a review on Airbnb that was so like Katherine said that she's a yogi, but she's not really a yogi. Like she was drunk. And I was like, then so ashamed. I'm like, how could I have done this? I am such a shame for yoga. And I went into my own script then. But throughout the years, and especially as I was going through this transformation, I'm like, look, this is what labels do to us. And I started realizing like my wild woman really wanted to come out and she didn't want to give explanations. And I started realizing through my women's work that this was happening to a lot of women, that just because they felt shame from a previous season of their life, they totally like plunged into spirituality and they just wanted to become this holy version of what they thought was holy and forget about other aspects, the naughty self, the kinky self, the wild woman that wanted to party or that wanted to even have fun. So I was like having my own awakening and I understood the handle. Tattoo changed. And I'm like, love wants you to be free. Love liberates you from anything that is a cage. And I'm like, I understood that episode in Argentina is like, I did that to myself because when I wrote them to book, I thought it was really important to introduce myself as a yogi. I don't know why, because I really wanted to fit into the yogi life. So I did that to myself. And I understood this as a big jewel because we do that to ourselves in so many other aspects, right? It's like we keep presenting ourselves through this script. And then we wonder why life meets us with judgments. But it's like, and then I understood that part of what I had to do with women was also liberate. It's like, where are you trying to fit so hard and why? Because I thought that me becoming a yogi was gonna cleanse me from all of my sins, from all the things I did previously that I felt ashamed of. So I was like repeating the same biblical scripture of like, I am dirty, there's something wrong with me, and yoga is gonna save me from my own madness, which was maddening and really pissing off parts of myself that felt like stop doing this to yourself, So it's like the integration, right? Of all the selves that are parts of us and understanding a little deeper. So I built myself this handle and I was working really hardcore on the media because as I told you, I launched this online business and it came from this beautiful place of like sharing and very organic. I started seeing women one-on-one, and also I launched this beautiful 7-week journey with women that I still love. And I'm always thinking like, how is that gonna come back to life? But I wanted to give a break because I gave birth to my second daughter and I took a maternity leave. when I was pregnant with my daughter, and before, I was working with this online platform called Sacred Sisters. And when I took my maternity leave, they also decided to close the platform. So I was like, oh, wow, like the universe, right? It's telling me, and I was already feeling this kind of like wariness of the ultra spiritual, you know. I wanted to just break out, you know, and discover. It's almost like this artsy place that can play, and it doesn't have to say so many things, because I love words, I love speaking, I love this podcast for that same reason. But I felt like I needed silence to rediscover myself. I'm like, who are you when you're not on social media? Especially when people go really hardcore, right? It's like almost like you're defining yourself. And I felt like these beautiful things of like recording everything became like it was wearing me down, you know? And I was like, I need to live life right now without recording anything. I need to give myself the challenge of like living this and having an amazing adventure and going through the withdrawals, because I went through the withdrawals, you know. I was used to like, oh my God. And from a beautiful place, it's like looking at this beautiful thing. And I was like, I need to share it with the world. And it's beautiful. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like so free, you know, if you have to do it all the time. If you feel like if you don't do it, you're not living that experience 100%. So I'm like, I need to go through the withdrawal of my biggest drug right now, which is like social media. And like really keep working on this codependency, you know, of like you need people to approve what is happening in your life for you to feel like it's completely worth it. And I'm like, I need to be worth it without anyone's approval. And I know it's gonna be a journey, but it's worth living it, right? Because we're in this life and we choose which experiences are gonna be part of our life. Some of them we don't choose, or we think that we don't choose. But at least this one, I was like, at least this one I am in control. And of course, it was absolutely like mind-blowing, you know, like it's literally like a drug withdrawal. It's like at the beginning, it feels really weird. Like I'm still picking up my phone and I'm like, okay. And then it becomes normal. And then you're like, oh, wow. Like I started writing because I feel like for me, it's all about this sharing, right? And I was like, okay, Catherine, like you can still be this poetic self and just record it, you know, like I wrote so much.
Okay, so since we had a little tech freeze, are you able to repeat what you said? It was so good. Or
Yeah,
just
I was saying like how important, you know, those times of stillness and like take the lead of doing things that we know are gonna be transformational yet hard, you know, because yeah, like I said, it's like when you're like in the highs of like sharing and feeling like people are listening to you, it feels very courageous, you know, to do the opposite, which is like, I'm gonna shut this down. I need to pay attention and to validate myself, validate my life, not according to any people's standards, like rediscover who we are when you know, like when you have built like a brand of yourself, you know.
Mhm.
Like it's beautiful, but at the same time, like I remember this woman commenting, you know, like social media is filled with positive but also like people hating on you. um and I remember this woman like commenting in one of my latest posts prior to me leaving for a year. And she said, it's like, what is liberating about like posting everything about your life? And like at the beginning, it hurt me. And I was like, well, if you don't, like I told her, like, well, if you don't resonate, like feel free to just scroll, like nobody's forcing anyone to relate or agree with everything. I've always been like, okay, take what resonates and then leave what doesn't, with everything. Even with this podcast, right? It's like people are gonna be listening and they're gonna be like, yeah, this feels close to my heart, and some other things they're gonna be like, yeah, maybe not that one. And that's the beauty of life, that we can walk around and nourish, and then at the same time let go of things that don't. But at the same time, like she did implant something in me that I was like, there's something right about what she's saying. That felt like I needed to hear, and it was all happening like life happens, simultaneously. And I always felt like I'm gonna speak about this one day, and here I am speaking about it. And I was like, yeah, what she said eventually, she planted a seed, and I was like, yeah, I want to find out what it is to live a whole year without sharing all the beauty that is happening in my life, but just sharing it with myself, just being in it and giving it this kind of presence that it's worth for every human being to give to their own life, this kind of presence and validation that only can happen through you, with your kids, with your husband, um, and be happy just for the sake of being alive, not because people are telling you that, yeah, your life is worth it, your life is so beautiful, oh my God, you're healing me, you're changing me. Because even though all of that is beautiful, it's also like a drug, that you're like leaning on. And it's also like keeping the codependency, it's almost like social media is the narcissist. And you're still like, pick me, like say that I'm worth it. And I was like, yeah, this is gonna feel like very, very strong medicine. And yeah, I'm back, but just like with anything that you leave for a year, even coffee, that you go back to it, differently, Maybe you get to enjoy it more because you're not so dependent on it, you know. Maybe you get to be more grateful for it because now you're not like, I need you, type of thing. So I'm back, but I don't have this intensity. I also don't work in that way right now. I'm not selling anything through social media, which I also think it's very healing for me right now. Actually, I have kind of like a yearning to open up a business here that it's like in person, that I work with people like um, with food and the hosting. Because I was telling my husband, like, how funny that I have changed career in a way so many times. But I started analyzing, like, there's something similar in everything that I do, which is like bringing people home. Because when I had a restaurant, that was what I loved the most. I'm like, people gather to share a meal, have conversations, have a drink. Uh, I've done like I love real estate, yoga and spiritual. It's like, okay, find your inner home. And I'm yearning for that connection one-on-one that is not online. And I feel like just appearing online without needing anything from it is like really important for me right now, you know. And who knows, because everything's changing. But such are the moments for me that I love, that I'm not like in that like I don't need that energy right now. I I I I love the connection, and I love these possibilities, and I love that there's no like ending to it. It's like follow this link because I'm gonna give you, because right now um the medicine of presence is like very important to me.
Yeah, even with the coffee analogy that you shared, it's like you move through toxicity and coming back to it, the body is going to be more bold in letting you know when that toxicity is coming back in. Like, so with like social media, you take some time off, you have like this detox, and then you come back and you're more sensitive to what doesn't belong in your world. And so your experience is more refined. You can do that easier because you're just like, there's less of this like numbing to it. Um, yeah, I feel
Yes.
that. Mm.
I think
And
also I have this rule that I try to listen to, and it's something that I encourage women to practice in, and it's a very important part of the divine feminine, which is that 7-week journey that I lead women into. So it's like listening, and not acting from FOMO, like it's like, when you're like doing something because you're like in fear of missing out, and when I feel these feelings in my body, I'm like, take a rest, sleep with it, feel if this is something for you, or if you're only doing it because you feel that if you don't do it, it's kind of like what I'm gonna tell my daughter when she has a party and there's a boy she likes, and she's gonna be like, Mom, I have to be there because this boy is there, and if I don't go, maybe he looks at another girl. And I'm gonna tell her like, if this is for you, he's gonna wait for you, And I have that feeling, I have that rule with myself and my family, because we also went through things like me and Neil in our marriage, and we learned to discern, and that when we're acting from this place of like fear, uh we need to rest. We need to rest, and especially as a family, where two parents are taking decisions, that we need to arrive to a place where we both say yes, and if one is not sure, we wait until that person has a full yes or a full no. So I feel like that has taught me a lot of empowerment, of like taking empowering decisions and intuitive decisions rather than continuing this energy that even as a grown-ups, we can still be trapped like in a teenager body, you know, like acting from this place, of like, like I need to, do everything that is available. And instead it's like, you know what? I'm gonna enjoy all the availability and choose what it feels right for me and my family, you know? It's like maturity, which is not easy, because sometimes the world tells you otherwise, that a successful woman needs to be doing a million things. But I think we're a very specific time right now in the world, especially with everything that is happening, right? Like we used to idolize like Hollywood, for example. And I feel like we're starting to understand that it's not what it looks like, and that the idealization of like fame and having things and all these things, it might be like a very sad reality. So it's like, how can you go back to that place of understanding that the most mundane, that boring days, it's a luxury, you know, that, for example, these Hollywood people don't get to have, you know, the beauty of like going outside and people not being on top of you is like privacy. It's like, I feel like as a whole consciousness, we're like setting our priorities slowly but surely in different arenas. So I look at like my own life. I'm like, it's impossible that what I'm feeling, I'm alone. I'm sure that so many people are feeling this, you know. It's like the necessity to value themselves and not be all the time like um needing to tell you that you're pretty, that you're good enough, that you know that you're a good mom, because it's an you still have time to, maybe that is not sustainable for you, and how can you live up to your own reality? Because I think like as a mom, I realize like that's what I'm teaching my girls. It's not, it is by example, you know, it is by example.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, even love liberates, to just come back to that tattoo and that handle. Like, how do you want to be loved? How do you love yourself? And when we ask ourselves those questions and move into the territory of discovering what that is, and the play through it, even if it's meditation, maybe it's not, maybe it's something else, but how we shower ourselves with love and how we receive love from the world around us and how we share it, it is liberation, because we look at all of the other things that fall away, the other things that we're carrying, or the other, it doesn't have to be about behaviors or activities or foods or anything. It could just be, it could be as simple as like thoughts and beliefs that we have lived with within our field for so long. And with this conversation around motherhood and social media, a lot of it feels very performative, and it's also like highly, like we have to be in this place of producing a lot, and you need to rest. If it's not the full body, yes, we do need to pause, we do need to rest, and that is love. And when we receive that self-love of just resting, however that looks, we are liberating ourselves from the need to, from the story that we have to be producing something, from the story that the actions of performing and how it looks. And of course it is okay to share beautiful things, and that your life is beautiful, and that's a wonderful thing to share. Yeah, I don't know. And I also just keep, I'm like switching really quick, because I keep thinking of when you mentioned like um you said the word sin earlier, and talking about like how you wanted to, the wild woman in you was like, pissed off for not being acknowledged and expressed. And something that was really transformative for me, was when I was really diving into that word specifically. What is this? If I can practice unconditional love and understand that love is understanding, and move into the realms of compassion within my sphere, I'm able to see conflict as just different perspectives, and I can honor each one, and I can see how we arrive to all of these different perspectives. And it's like really okay to say, I understand that, I'm not choosing that, and I still love you. Like we can do all of that. But when I was going into the word sin specifically, it seems like it has this attachment of like good and bad. But really that doesn't really, I don't know, it's nothing is that simple. And I just feel the word sin has just become so ingrained in so many cultures throughout the world, and it's I think its origin is more rooted in separation. It's like sin is separation, and that means separation from our holiness, separation from the divine. That doesn't mean it's bad. It means when we refuse to acknowledge, or we don't acknowledge that we are divine, that a bee is divine, that a tree is divine, that everything in the world, everything that is life is life force energy knowing itself and expressing itself, then we enter into separation, and that's where we get tension. And love liberates us from that separation, because it opens us up into compassion. And we can do this through social media, but like being in person, I know people are craving this. I myself am craving those kinds of gatherings to just be in. We can have this beautiful conversation, and I love it. But if we were sitting on the floor, on a cushion with one another, with perhaps cacao or tea, it would feel different, and it would still be different, and it would be more. It's not that we can't have the heart coherence through online experiences, but it is different, because I'm not in your garden. I'm not sitting on the same earth that you're sitting on. And so we're I don't know, I guess there's some beauty here too, because I can bring in the cool misty air for you from the Portland area and say, yeah, it's cold, and here's the medicine of the cold for me today, and I could share that with you. So I'm just kind of like circling here, but love is liberation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was like the main thing for me, is like any label, even if it's beautiful, it's still a label, because if I label myself even as a beautiful person, then the part of me that it's ugly is like, what the heck, I also belong here. Like and I think like that is the main beauty of what I try to like give, even with my friends, it's like I always find that when my friends visit me, there's always like processes that open, and they're like, how come we always end up sharing these things with you? And I love it. I'm like, because I'm not expecting you to come here and be perfect or have the perfect vacation. I'm like, I give people full permission to be themselves, and sometimes in that permission, there's like really cool things, in how we perceive like cool aspects. But sometimes there's like deep processes of like ugliness. And I'm like, I feel really good. And it's a compliment, like for me, that you trust me so much to show me these sides of you. Because it's only when we trust people that we can show the ugly, Like a lot of times we're walking around like, like, look at the 5 things that I'm really good at. And then the places that we feel shame or we feel not good enough, we hide them really hard, But then, who is those people, that you feel really comfortable in being all of yourself, And I really value that. And I think that is the part that I was sharing with you, that I feel like in everything that I do, I carry with me, And then I started understanding, it's like, wait a minute, like if you like it is your essence why people want to be with you, not because you have this ultimate divine truth, that you're gonna sit on a temple and give people this. Like people want to be with you because it's you, and this really came hard to me through all of these awakenings. And I started understanding, it's like, oh yeah, like I love when people come to my house and I have these super deep or funny, absolutely hilarious, like conversations. And I'm always tending to them. I'm always cooking, have a plate of food, have some tea, have some coffee, and it's that feeling of home, which is so deep, feeling of home is like a feeling of like, me at home is like I can be naked, like I can finally take off the coat of how I'm supposed to be behaving in the world, all these sets of rules, and I can finally relax in my whole entire being. That a lot of people don't even feel that at their own home is true. Therefore, it's like the necessity, you know, and I feel like there is a lot of wellness that comes from it, that a lot of times it's unspoken, you know, because I get it. Like, I get it that to eat healthy, to do all of these things really change your life, because it did change my life. You know, I'm also like a nutritionist coach, you know, and I gave, like I told you, during those years, I was like, eat green, you know, like my smoothies, vegetarian. And then 2020 comes, and I feel like I had like the virus even before everyone was talking about the virus, you know? And I feel like my body was like so depleted. And we got invited, me and Neil, because we were hosting these groups. It was not like a yoga event, it was more like a surfing group, but it was over Christmas, right before 2020. And they had this banquet, meats and stuff. And I felt it. My body is like, eat this meat right now. And I look at my husband and I'm like, I'm gonna eat this meat. And he's like, go for it. And it's like all part of the same revolution, you know, of like giving yourself permission to be human, you know, to be in flesh. And I remember this woman, this teacher, and she's like, you're happy and you don't need anything. You don't need coffee. You don't get angry. You never drink. You never do drugs. Like, oh my God, you're not human, you know? Like this sense of like this neediness to attain perfection is also a disease, you know? Because I saw it in me. I'm like, I was always like not very acute, but especially during the years that I would wake up at 4:30, you know, I was like really into it, meditate. Everything was like structured. I was like, God, like I am in this trance that I also need to get out, you know. I also need to go out and live a little. But it was really my body that was like, eat this meat right now. Like you need to nourish in this way. And I was like, wow, so important, you know, to listen to your intuition. And I understand there's seasons and seasons, you know, there's seasons of detoxing, there's seasons of going back to something and understanding that everything has its medicine. I even tell people that going to sobriety, I'm like, that is beautiful and courageous. But if you start now judging everyone that is having a drink, you also need to watch, you know, your sobriety and see how also the toxicity of judgment also is toxic, you know, on its own. And it's also engaging you in another cage. Like now you switch one cage for the other cage, you know? And it's beautiful, you know, to observe that in your journey. Like I told you, I reached my 40s. So it's like now I feel like I have lived many personalities that I took very seriously. I'm like, oh, I am this person. And I'm like, oh, I get it. You know, personalities come and go just like your wardrobe, you know. Like when I moved from Hawaii, I remember I looked at all of my closet and I'm like, oh, this closet is beautiful, but it's not me anymore. And I just left everything. It's like the first move out that I'm like, left everything. We moved with one suitcase each. And I'm like, all of that is so beautiful, but it's not who I am anymore. So it must go, you know? And now I need to embody this new persona, which I don't even know who that is. But I also don't have to take it so seriously either, you know? It's like understanding that just like our clothes, you know, this is what feels right with who I am in this moment. It might change too, you know? The essence, though, the essence. And that's why I feel like now in my 40s, I value those friendships that have remained forever. Because I'm like, oh my God, these people really stood by me through all of these personalities that I became, and they didn't judge me and they still love me because they could see, you know, like the essence that remained. And now I laugh about it because I'm like, yeah, we 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 embark on these journeys. And I think that at the end of life, which who knows when it's gonna come, what is it gonna feel like, you know? Is it gonna be like this was all a dream, you know? And in the end, I do believe what people say is like we're only gonna keep the love that we gave and the love that we received, you know? We're not gonna be like thinking like, oh yeah, like in Latin America, we have this saying that is like que me quiten lo bailado, which means nobody will take away how much I danced, you know?
Mm.
So it's like zero remorse, you know? It's like I gave it all. I lived in my own way, which I think it's how I want to live life. Is the example I want to give my girls, you know? It's like not be afraid of failure. It's, I feel like at some point I was really afraid of failure, and I understood it's like failure is part of success. If you don't know how to fail, you can never succeed because you're gonna be like in the corner of the living room, really afraid to start off anything. Because with the start of anything, there's a risk of failure, you know? So it's like, and I want to embody that more, you know, and more and more. Like living life from this perspective of like not feeling like there's a right or wrong decision. I feel like you said this at the beginning. It's like, it's just go with what you feel, you know? Um, and life is taking you on this journey.
Yeah, I mean, even failure is just like realignment, right? Because it's like what are we really failing at? Like at accomplishing a projected like expectation. Maybe that expectation needed to be released. Maybe whatever it is that you wanted to do or to create is not like the highest expression of the essence that you're pouring through it. And so really it's just like a pathway of learning and discovering more. So it's like not even really a failure. It's learning. And we
Yeah.
move through that throughout our whole lives. And when I'm thinking about like we love ourselves through that, right? Because nobody can take away how much you danced, right? It's like even in like the Egyptian temples, they have like the goddess Ma'at, and her entire role is at death, measuring the heart. It's not measuring how much you've done wrong, it's measuring how much love is there, how much love is moving through you. And it's nobody can take that away because it grows.
Yeah. So beautiful. And I always think like what, you know, when you close your eyes and go back to like thinking of your parents, you know, what was it that you wanted the most, you know, from them? And I was like, no, I never wanted perfect parents. I wanted to experience them happy, you know. I wanted to see them happy because when you see your parents happy, it's like it gives you full permission for you to be happy. And you know, and like I said also at the beginning, is like balance, which is another thing I have tattooed in my body. balance, right? It's like balance looks different from me to you and to other persons. So it's really hard to judge balance, you know? It's like being balanced. It's like my balance looks like this right now. In a year or two, could look different. But like I remember my parents in specific, I feel like it was also part of the epoch, you know, of the society and how you were raising kids. It's like in a very beautiful way, I feel like they made a big effort to hide their imperfections. And I feel like something that I always remember is like when I started perceiving my own imperfections as I was growing older in my teenage years, I was always questioning, is like, why I'm so imperfect? Like if my parents are so perfect, like they never had any addictions, any like they're so hardworking, you know, which left like a blank page in the book, you know, of like, oh yeah. And I guess now in my parenthood, I just try to remember that it's like my kids don't want to see me perfect. Like they just want to see me happy and real. And I try to bring like a lot of vulnerability and open and having conversations with your kids. Everything's fine. You know, there's no way that you could bring perfection into every aspect because it doesn't exist, you know, in this human form. But if you're having conversations and like we were talking about our kids at the beginning of the podcast, it's like sometimes I go to sleep with my oldest and she says these things and I'm like, where's this wisdom coming from? Like the other night, like she ponders a lot around death, which I think it's so beautiful and it's part of her age too, you know, it's like understanding the continuity and like seeing animals die and it's like where do they go? And the other night she said to me, it's like as we go to sleep, like usually these deep questions come up. And it's like I see them coming through and she says, Mom, you're gonna die before me because you're older. And she's like, well, maybe I can die before you if there's an accident. And I'm like, imagine how I'm feeling, you know, like as she says these things. And then and I'm like tearing up already, it's like crying, you know, in the dark when she says these things. And she goes, but it doesn't matter because we're always together. Like there's nothing that brings us separate. And I'm like, just holding her, you know, and my other daughter, like just crying. And I'm like, ah, I'm like, if I could only feel that certainty inside of my bones, I feel like I could always be happy because for parents, I feel like the biggest pain is to feel like something can happen to your kids or to you and bring you separate, you know? And I'm like, I wish I had that faith, you know, ingrained in my bones that there's nothing that could happen that could bring us apart, you know, because it's truly everything. I feel like it really rules my biggest fears is like that, you know, and I'm like, this little munchkin just brings that. And then she's like, okay, good night. And I'm like, you know, the wisdom that the little ones bring and these concepts, you know. Mhm.
They're here to remind us of that, you know. I remember those moments with my own mother when I might have said something that she was overwhelmed by, like, oh, we're never separate. We just all do the best we can, or whatever it was. And I remember her holding me really tight as if it was the medicine she needed most in those moments. And you know, I'm sure you've had those experiences too. Your mom had that, and our children just remind us of that. And I think it's so beautiful. Um, Oh my goodness. Okay, so we can go forever, I think. And I
I know.
I know that you are building so much in your community, but for anyone who's listening, like, do you have your back on social media as your body is allowing, as you are desiring, and you're making your own rules with that, and that's perfect because that is we all need to receive the permission from within ourselves to show up how we want to show up. So thank you for speaking into that here. And I'd love to ask, like, where can people find you? And I know Instagram is definitely one place, and we can link to that. But even like in your physical location, are you receiving people in your space?
Yeah, I'm the social butterfly, or I don't know if that's a word, but I love having conversations. My husband sometimes is like, I could be in the park talking to like so many people that I don't even know, and I always bring this juiciness. And sometimes he's like, how do you find these people? And I'm like, I think that is in my essence, and that's why I'm having the feeling of like having a physical space to receive people. We're actually on the works. We have our Airbnbs, but I'm in the business planning of like a cafe with social and green and things for the kids. It's in the works. I feel like I'm I'm always gonna have this deepness, and I love working with people. I am welcoming the one-on-one with women. I still carry on that work. I I I still believe so much in the journey that I created for women. And it's not like I created it. I feel like the universe created it through me. Because when I look at it and the things that we cover, it's just like I told you about the tattoos. It's like whatever you're teaching is teaching you. And if it's not teaching you, it's like, what is going on? So there's these concepts around the divine feminine. It's like a seven. I constructed it like a 7 week, but I even did it in person when I was in Hawaii with women. And it's so powerful. And it's so funny because every time I would teach it, it would like back backlash me with something like, oh, you think you're so cool to be teaching this? Like, well, now show me that you actually can embody, these concepts. And I think like this is very alive, that divine feminine. And I think I am meant to keep bringing it. But it's funny because it's like a cycle that keeps happening to us, because it starts with arrival and it ends with surrender, which is like birth and death, on its own. But it can happen to you in a business, in a relationship. It can happen on the everyday, waking up, going to sleep. But it teaches us as women to carry the seasons with coherence, with presence, and not try to be like in the highs all the time, thinking like that is the right thing to be, even in a relationship. It's like I talk to my husband, when things don't feel so high and so cool, I'm like, maybe we're supposed to be here, So it's like it teaches us, because I feel like women, we are made of this essence of like being very moon, it's like we can touch all of these aspects and still remain in the essence of like there's one moon, not because the moon we perceive it as full or half or new. The moon's still the moon, we're perceiving her like she's gonna come back. And I feel like there might be a place in time where this comes back. I feel like I'm carrying it in the presence that I give this surrender, because I feel like when I stop doing this as an online, I carry the essence of surrender, of like let go and trust the process of what and how you're meant to be giving. into the society and into the global consciousness, into other women. And I'm in this process of trusting, you know, being in the cocoon. It's like I have no idea, even though some things are in the works. But at the same time, I'm trusting this unknown, which is not the most comfortable place to be sometimes for us humans, you know, because we like to see everything very well in detail. But yeah, I mean, if you are someone listening to this and you're feeling like there's resonance in your moment with my process, feel free to reach out. I love to have conversations. It could lead into a beautiful, simple conversation, or it could lead into something greater. And I'm open for it. I'm open to the universe, you know, to the universal ways of things happening. And thank you so much for having me here. I know that we women, we can talk and come back to things. And maybe there's a continuation, you know, if there's a feeling of like going into something more specific. But I'm trusting that this is where a lot of us are at, you know, in this discovery and very courageous ways of being in humanity right now, with a lot of uncertainty, with a lot of unknown, with a lot of fear, constructing places inside of ourselves that are like resilient, you know, despite what our nervous system wants to think. You know, it's like, no, I can build myself a home, even if home is being destructed by hurricanes. You know, it's like how can I feel at home inside of myself, you know, even if the economics and the political and everything else says the opposite. You know, I feel like we need to have our backs and feel that well inside, you know, before we can see it being built outside, you know. It's like we're building a world, but from the inside, which is going to be way more sustainable, you know, than building it from the outside towards the self, you know.
Definitely. We'll have to, for sure, have a continuation here as you are creating something, as you said, from the inside. You're not working off of a recipe, but from the inside. And I know that I love personally to, I mean, I'm going through this process on my own as well, of just like deep trust and not knowing where things, not knowing the how. And so as we find those other people around the world who are also leading with trust and building from within, it's fun to get together and like how did the universe show up for you? What happened here? Like and yeah, and move through that. So um with that, again, I just want to thank you again for coming on here and sharing your world and sharing your heart. And we'll definitely put your links in the show notes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you.